a good defense, what is it? A good offense is the best defense. And so I proceeded to become as offensive as possible. And it worked. I was in a program that was called Living Learning, and it was an experiment that they were performing at the college. You had to submit something, some kind of a project, to let them know that you were bright enough or creative enough that they could somehow use you in the experiment. And all of us, there were 80 of us, we all lived in the same dormitory, so we were like a school within a school. We had complete control, us students had complete control of the educational process. We determined what our classes would be, who would teach them, how many credits they were worth, and what our grades were at the end of the term. It was all done through negotiation with the teachers. So the freedom was incredible, and I started to really try to explore some of this stuff, but I was the only gay person there that was openly gay about it, although I have met another man in Eugene. His picture, in fact, is in one of the Lavender Networks, the latest one, who I went to college with back then. He was in the Living Learning program with me. And we met each other last year at Halloween. It was a complete surprise. We saw each other on the streets in Eugene, Halloween night, and were just shocked. You know, it was like, ah, what are you doing here? Well, it was a lot of fun. We were glad that we found each other again. The second year that I was in college, I got a room of my own, and I wasn't in Living Learning. I was going to try to attend the regular school, which you would have had to do anyway. You couldn't get a degree in this program. It was only a 2-year program. And that year, I attempted suicide twice within about 3 months. I left school as a result of it, and spent the next several years, actually, trying to figure out why I had done it. Because at the time, it seemed like a normal kind of thing to do. It seemed very logical. And I didn't realize until later just how crazed I must have been. I was leading this really schizophrenic life, evidently. That was when I first started to take my gayness responsibly. When it first started to dawn on me that if I didn't take command of this thing, that it would destroy me. So that was the point where I finally decided that my life was important enough that I was going to have to start dealing with this. And I did. I started living in Roseburg and went down, at that time the Rainy Day Bookstore had just opened. I went down to the Rainy Day Bookstore and bought their entire line of gay books, all 4 of them, and took them home. And one of the books that they had was a catalog, kind of a whole earth catalog called Gay Swords, which has since become a classic. It's a real collector's item. I gave my copy to Billy and Doug to use in the old gala. And it was part of their library then. The library, of course, which is later on in the story, I guess, but the first library that we had scattered to the 4 winds, and so I guess that particular copy is now lost. But we had it for several years. There were 2 things in that book that wound up providing a direction for the rest of my life. One of them was it gave an address for RFD, which at that time was being published in Wolf Creek. The editor at that time was Candor Smoothstone, later Martin Zero, who just died of AIDS recently. It was this that forced me to go down to Wolf Creek to find out. I'd sent them some of my poetry and wanted to find out what had happened to it. I'd waited about a month and didn't hear anything, and it was kind of, my curiosity was aroused. And I wanted to see what this place was really like. and also to find out what they had done with my poetry. And so I went down there. And I made the mistake, at that time I was also in the National Guard. I'd gone into the National Guard in 1976. And so I wore my uniform to go down there. Well, I was thinking, you know, oh, a military uniform, you know, they'll love it. They'll love it. No, they did not love it. I walked down there and they nearly killed me. Who is this little fascist and what's he doing on our property? Well, I didn't know, you know, I was probably 22 or 23, something like that. So I really was quite naive. It was kind of humorous looking back on it, because most of those people that were living there then I still know and keep in contact with, and we're still friends. We're much better friends now than we were then, in fact. The other thing that it had in it was an article on the bathhouses, what a bathhouse was. I'd never even heard of such a thing. And then it listed 4 of them in Portland. So the first opportunity I got, I went to Portland and went to a bathhouse. That was an amazing experience. I wound up, eventually, it took a few months, but I wound up moving to Portland and living with a bathhouse attendant for about 9 months. He was my first roommate. Well, you can't, unless you've got some kind of discretionary income, you really can't afford to go to bathhouses. And so there was this bathhouse attendant that I was living with. He taught me about the parks. And that was like an amazing new avenue. It was the bathhouse, but it was less expensive. And I'm still fond of parks. I find that there's kind of an element of adventure in it, you know. Yeah. I want to talk a little more about Portland, because that was a really interesting time. For a while I just kind of shuttled back and forth. I would go up, I was working for an auto parts store in Roseburg, and I would shuttle up to Portland to spend the weekend, and then come back down, you know, when the whole weekend was over. Eventually, I did move to Portland, lived there for 3 years. I'm ready. Okay. It's kind of difficult to remember. Now let's see. I went into the service in '76. Well, okay, the summer before that, in '76, I had been in Portland for the whole summer. I lived as a monk that summer, an Episcopal monk, with the Society of St. Paul, which was in Sandy. And they were in the process of moving to a new location. I had no idea at that time. I was still, this was, you know, '75 was the year that I had attempted suicide. So it was the following summer, '75, right, it was the following summer that I was still kind of wandering around, you know, and trying to figure out what I had done.